Hello, Dr. Shalini. Can you?
Yes, Papia. Hello. Thank you for having me. I can hear you clearly.
Oh, that's great. Now we will get started, and I will request Dr. Aditya to formally take over.
Vijayadashmi greetings, everyone. Good evening in India. Good afternoon in UK. Good morning in US. Hello, Manish ji. So both time and distance in this globalized world is being worked out for this lecture series. And then there is this need to keep physical distance as part of COVID appropriate behavior. Interesting, isn't it? Anyway, you'll have a mesmerizing time this evening listening to Professor Deepak Kumar, who will intellectually definitely walk your distance. We have Professor Ashok Ghosh for an inaugural note. And then we have Salini Oja, who is originally from here, but now at Nottingham. And then Manish Bhardwaj, who is at Princeton, but is engaged in a lot of health-related activism, non-governmental work in Bihar. My senior colleagues from the institute here at IIT Patna, elsewhere, and friends, on behalf of the organizing team of this lecture series, I welcome you all. As you know, this lecture series is part of an ICSSR-IMPRESS funded project where Dr. Papia is a PI. The title of the project is mHealth Technologies for Gender Empowerment in Bihar. When the fieldwork data was being analyzed, the influence of the past was also severely felt, and also what we can think through as history in the making. We'll talk more about it when we get opportunity in between. We are very impressed by the overwhelming response. The team just tells me that there are more than 450 participants registered. This event is also being streamed on YouTube. This is the third in the series of the lectures. We started earlier this month with Director IIT Patna inaugurating it and Professor Sachidanand Sinha from CSRD JNU as our key speaker. The second lecture was by Professor Tulsi Patel, who retired from Delhi School of Economics and was my teacher at Jamia Millia Islamia. And in that lecture series, we had a set of people, Professor Indira Ramarao, Professor Akram, Professor Ajailu. And it's my pleasure even today to have this opportunity to be the linking dot for the amazing scholars that we have today. Let us get started with the inaugural. I'll introduce to you Professor Ashok Ghosh, who is here to bless us with his inaugural note. He's a well-known academician and a very able administrator. He started his journey by securing first positions both in bachelor's and master's from the renowned Science College, Patna. Professor Ghosh was in charge when we first met him at the Department of Environment and Water Management, Teaching and Research at AN College, Patna. Presently, he is the chairman, as you know, of Bihar State Pollution Control Board and member of Regional Empowered Committee, Minister of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. He's also working as a professor and HOD at the Mahavir Cancer Institute and Research Center, Patna. The thrust area of his research is groundwater, and we have known a lot about extensive groundwater arsenic contamination in this area and its health impact from his work. In addition to this, he is also the professor in charge of DST supported project InnoWater and several other projects. There is a page in front of me that I've listed, but you're here to listen to him and not about him. You can always Google and find out. He has been involved in research projects with various renowned institutions of Netherlands, UK, Sweden, Germany. With this note, I would like to invite you, sir, for an inaugural today. Thank you, sir. Over to you, Professor Ghosh.
Thank you, Aditya. Thanks a lot for introducing me. Rightly said that as of now, I am half scientist and half bureaucrat. In the pre-lunchtime period, I am a scientist working in Mahavir Cancer Sansthan and Research Institute as head of the research. And in the post-lunch, I became a chairman of Bihar State Pollution Control Board. It has advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is there that when I was only a scientist, it was very difficult to convince the bureaucrats about the policies and outcomes, research outcomes. But when I became chairman and scientist, then I can approach the policymakers more easily, and they give a ear to whatever I say. But then, it is difficult to task together. Today's topic that has been selected is very relevant, that is health concerns in colonial India. And it is very timely also because we are running through pandemic, Corona, COVID pandemic. And since last 2 years, uh, throughout the world, we have a series of problems. And most of us have come on virtual mode. We are not meeting one another in physical world, but at least we have internet and virtual mode. But of course, it cannot substitute the physical meetings. But then we don't have a choice. We have to bear with that. The topic that is here, health concerns in colonial India. I'm not a man of history, but whatever I've heard about the overall background, the overall nature, the things going on, in early times, in the pre-colonial time period and colonial early time of colonial time, early phase of colonial time, religion was always there involving the pandemics. Like diseases like leprosy. Most of the people thought at that time the concept was there that if the disease is there like leprosy and other diseases, it is curse of God. There was no scientific basis for that. But there was belief was there that diseases, particularly the pandemics, they are the curse of God. God punishes for sins committed by us. And the best example, of course, to quote here is leprosy, that is seen as the reflection of the wrath of God bestowed on the body of individual as a warning of future sinners and symbol of the providence of God. But this idea changed slowly, and from in the religion, thrust shifted to environment. Westerners, particularly Europeans, colonizing in the early part of their history in India, they blamed most of the diseases to Indian conditions, the poverty, the hot atmosphere, rains, moisture, bacteriological contamination, and for everything like disease like cholera and malaria, somehow or other it was thought that the diseases are originating from India. And most of the diseases like cholera and malaria particularly, they were attributed to poor countries where poverty was there and the hygienic conditions was not there. And at that time, the most of the focus was there on this aspect. The diseases are coming from countries like India and it's spreading the worldwide. But this changed. But this changed a lot after time. And by the middle of the 19th century, as the colonial state extended its arms for administration, it was supposed that all the Indians working as servants, they are the carriers of the different diseases. And that is why by the mid of 19th century, cholera and other diseases, they become very predominant in our focus area. But then plague was a totally different issue, where it was confirmed that it's not always that India can be blamed for every diseases. It may be reverse also. Diseases may pass from India to Europe and Europe to India also. The world is not isolated. Earlier, different continents were isolated. But with the convenience in traveling, all continents now they're connected, and the diseases pass from one continent to other. And by the end of closing decades of 20th century, plague emerged as a major source of concern for the colonial states. And rodents entered through goods that reached to the ship, docks, and subsequently spread through flies. And it is thought that it is a fact rather that when the ships crossed from Hong Kong towards India, Bombay and other cities, the disease also spread in the Indian continent also. And then things, from religion to the environment, and then to science. Today we know that science is what is the scientific reason behind the diseases like cancer or HIV or other diseases, or even the disease like COVID. Earlier, we blamed China, that China is the source of all our problems. But blame game cannot continue. In today's world, you cannot say that any particular geographical region or any particular part of the country, they are responsible for the emergence of any particular disease. It is not a closed society or closed economy. The world is common, but a time was there in colonial era when the world was very divided, and it will be good to listen to experts of today's talk. Thank you very much for asking me to be present here and just speak a few words. Thank you very much, Aditya.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. The organizing team wants me to tell you that when Professor Deepak Kumar is speaking, please keep your mic muted. And if you have any questions, you can please write in the chat. And if the number swells to 100, don't worry, you can always listen in the chat. Fine. Okay, let me briefly introduce Professor Deepak Kumar, our speaker today. Deepak sir, as we know him, is the bestest person I know and amazing scholar. He has taught history of science and education at Zakir Hussain Center for Educational Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has been a researcher, teacher, philosopher on histories of science, technology, environment, and medicine, his STEM in brief, in the context of modern India for more than 4 decades. Earlier, he had taught history at Kurukshetra University and had been a visitor has been a visitor as Wisconsin Medicine, USA, York University in Toronto. He has lectured extensively at several institutions within India and abroad. He has organized more than 24 seminars and conferences and participated in a number of them. He also was the president, convener, vice president of several associations and conferences. In 1997, I believe he founded the International Commission on Science and Empire and remained its president until 2001. In 2008, he had organized and presided over the 20th International Association of the Histories of Asia in New Delhi, in which I wanted to participate but couldn't get to India at that time. Professor Kumar has been visiting fellow and has professorships at various institutions of universities of Cambridge, London, Tehran, Jerusalem, Santiniketan, Hyderabad, Banaras, Calcutta, Max Planck, many institutions. He is very well known for his book, Science and the Raj. All my students read this book. And in addition, he has co-edited and authored several books on technology, medicine, education, environment. His Trisenku Nation is yet another remarkable book. To name a few of his administrative experiences as head of history and philosophy of science, NISTATS, couple of times chairman of Zakir Hussain Center, campus development committee at JNU, many things, founder chairperson of Media Research Center at JNU. I'll stop now. We all are waiting to hear Deepak sir. Over to you, sir. Sir is well known for his amazing scholarship, very high quality scholarship. So, Professor Deepak Kumar now.
Thank you very much, Professor Ghosh, Dr. Aditya Raj, my colleagues. I'm grateful to IIT Patna for giving me this opportunity to share some of my researches or some of my thoughts on a problem of great contemporary relevance, but it has been there as part of our historical journey, our evolution as a civilization, and the concern for health has been very crucial to our existence. I do apologize for not bringing any PowerPoint or something in written form. Normally, I like to talk from my heart, and do forgive me if I do not appear coherent. But I shall try to make certain points in the course of my talk. When I was approached, I thought of this theme, health concerns in colonial India. These are the two very crucial terms I use, one health, the other colonial. Let me explain what I understand by them. Health has two kinds of connotations. One positive, for example, when we say you feel good, energetic, you say yes, good health. There is another connotation which refers to absence of disease, absence of certain problems which affect humans all around, everywhere, all through ages. Well, to talk about absence of disease, or to ensure absence of disease, it would be almost like going against nature. Diseases, microbes, viruses as we know them today, we have been in coexistence, living in coexistence, not very peaceful coexistence, but together for since creation. Time immemorial. And our concern for body, concern for health has been there all the time. Right from the most ancient literature, the Vedic literature, down till today, we have health as a very crucial issue coming up all the time. Second thing which I use the term is colonial. I would like to say right at the beginning that colonialism was not philanthropy. No. It was an extension of power, exercise of power by some people who took advantage of the then existing knowledge, maybe cutting edge knowledge, and established their authority over less fortunate brethren or communities. It happened. I don't normally regret it. There is no point flogging a dead horse, or maybe a horse which has now undergone metamorphosis in coming up in different forms. There is no point. It should be taken, colonialism should be taken as a fact of history. In fact, I rather treat it as a force of history. It emerged because certain forces helped it emerge. And it was not a miracle that, almost 75% of the globe came to be colonized by the end of the 19th century. No, it was not. There is no divinity in it. It had a lot of historical reasons behind it that it emerged. So, sometimes people do talk in terms of colonial medicine. How colonial was colonial medicine? Even before the term colonial medicine came, people used the term geographical in nature, tropics, tropical medicine, tropical health. As you know, that when the European explorers left their shores, came to other parts of the world, they came as explorers, but gradually settled, gradually took to commerce, and commerce later was replaced by rule, established rule. So trade, flag, everything followed. They all talked in terms of tropical climate, tropics. So, so these are certain terms which we need to keep in mind. How tropical was tropical medicine? And how the climate determined, or the very existence of the tropic determined certain kind of policies that they pursue, and the way the recipients, we reacted to it, how we responded to it. Let me go back again to the first term, health. As I said earlier, it has been reflected in our literature. It begins as Deva Bheshaj in deep ancient past. You have incantations and mantras in the Veda, but gradually, Atharva Veda, but gradually, this Deva Bheshaj became Yukti Bheshaj. It took several centuries. But some of the Sangitas, especially the Charak Sangita, composed 2nd century BC, is definitely a very fine example of Yukti Bheshaj. Yukti is a very crucial term, very important term. It denotes reason, logic. There are no mantras, no incantations in these Sangitas, Charak Sangita, later Sushruta, much later Bhagavata, and many others. So the knowledge came to be codified. Experiential knowledge gradually became tested knowledge, experimental knowledge. You have knowledge of different kinds. Certain knowledge you experience, and certain other kinds of knowledge you experiment with and you come across. So here you will see that in ancient past also, our forefathers did experiment and came out with certain observations, which today may not hold true, but definitely was logical enough for their own time and for many, many centuries later. The beauty of Charaka is that he made knowledge Sharir Mulak, centered around body. In Upanishad, it is spirit. It's not body. Knowledge is there, but that knowledge is around, what constitutes the ultimate reality, Satya, and so forth. Brahma, Satya, and so forth. But it is Charaka who makes knowledge Sharira Mulak. And the process goes on. It was not that only the medical science you have other great philosophical traditions like Sankhya, Vaisheshika, which were rooted in matter, which talked about Panchabhutas. Certain things which one could see, touch, experience, and find their relevance in our existence. Later, you'd notice that our civilization had a very interesting way to advance. It kept on writing commentaries. Every generation, every century, you will find commentaries being written. Bhash, Nighantu, Tika, Tippani, all kinds of literature you will find it being written. Sometime a particular kind of text was followed by a large number of people for a very, very long time. So it became canonized knowledge. Shastra Sammat Gyan. Sometimes when Shastra Sammat Gyan becomes, or canonized knowledge becomes too strong, it's very difficult to challenge it. Very difficult to challenge. This happened in many, many areas, like astronomy. When the Puranas dictated that it is Rahu and Ketu who are responsible for lunar and solar eclipses. It is very difficult to challenge it. Though our astronomers, like Brahmagupta, Varamir, all of them knew that it happens because of the shadow of one falling on the another. But to fight canonized knowledge is tough. However, science will advance only by asking questions. Why, how, so forth. By not destroying canonized knowledge, but challenging canonized knowledge. And people did. In Niganthus, people did. There were always some addition, some subtraction in that knowledge. If you look at Bhagavata Ashtanga, you know, it is not a replication of the earlier text, for example, Charaka Samhita, no. It builds upon that and makes its own assertions. Similarly, in 9th century, you have Ibn Sina's Al-Qanun, which emerges as a canonized knowledge, very strong. Its relevance remains even today. Our Vedyas refer to Charaka Samhita, Sushruta, and Unani practitioners refer to Al-Qanun, Ibn Sina, in one form or the other. It did serve our society to a large extent. Of course, there were diseases. There are references to epidemics, which were called Janapada Vidvansa. Diseases, you know, epidemics which killed Janapadas, finished Janapada after Janapada. They were there. But we kept on struggling with how to come out of it. We kept on struggling with the disease. This has been a story of lots of success and lots of failure in dealing with our body and in understanding our body also. You know, we didn't know about blood circulation earlier, much before, before Harvey, probably not. Dissection was done by Sushruta, but, you know, the way he conceived of the body gradually fell into disuse for certain many other reasons, many other societal reasons and so forth. So sometimes we moved ahead, sometimes we went down. We retraced our steps for different political, cultural, social reasons. I will not go into such details because that would be diverse. But I'm just hinting at the possibility that we had a very strong medical tradition before the Europeans came. And when the Europeans arrived in 16th, 17th century, every boat had a person who had some knowledge of medicine and surgery. They were trained in Scottish or North European universities. Every boat had one surgeon. He was called surgeon naturalist. Every boat. The Dutch East India Company, the French East India Company, the English East India Company, they all carried, they came with. And it is these surgeon naturalists who, when landed on our shore, started exploring. Whatever they touched was something new. So they became botanists, they became geologists, they were climatologists in their spare hour. And other time they were medical practitioners. Portuguese came here with their own set of medical practices, and you have the names of Garcia da Horta and many others who looked into the then existing local medical knowledge, tried to integrate, learn from each other. They not only brought up their own medical knowledge, sometimes they brought their own diseases. In fact, it is said that sexually transmitted diseases were brought by the Portuguese. And it was called, our people called it Firangi Roga. Bhava Mishra calls it Firangi Roga. Because it came from the Firangs brought it. So disease was something which couldn't be contained, as we all know, you know, germs, water. They don't respect boundaries. Good ideas also. Good ideas should be boundaryless. They don't respect boundaries. Artifacts, technologies, techniques, they spread. They may originate at one region, but given the opportunity, they spread fast. This is what was happening in 16th, 17th century. You will see in Mughal court, many those surgeon-trained medical men of European origin, they started serving and they wrote books. You have the example of this. You have several examples, not only Garcia Dorta, but several examples. And they interacted with the local noblemen. In fact, there was a French surgeon who talked to a Mughal noble called Danishwan Khan, how the circulation of blood was taking place. He brought the knowledge of Harvey to Agra. He couldn't succeed in convincing him, that's another story, but efforts were made. One thing we need to keep in mind is that those days, epistemologically, at the concept level, there was not much difference. Both were based on the Greek system, the European system, the Unani, the Ayurvedic. They were all based on humors. Some had 3 humor, another had 4 humor, some had 5 humors. And they believed in the restoration of balance in those doshas. So, you could never become dosh-rahit. Dosh will be there. But the effort was to maintain equilibrium, a balance among the doshas. And something, if the balance is not maintained, then disease comes in. Then you have sickness. So in 16th, 17th century, the conceptual level, we were almost the same. And in many areas, even the remedy given were similar. Opium was used by everyone, calomel. Even now, we have synthesized the painkillers, etc. But the painkillers numb you, as opium used to do earlier. The Unani practitioners used certain elements which were a little different, while the Ayurvedic practitioners, they used mostly remedies of vegetable origin and sometime minerals. And this was basically an experiential knowledge, which was, in many cases, was experimented and then accepted. And it had a local flavor of its own. There were people who tried fermentation. The yogis. Today you know about the Nath Sampradaya. They were alchemists. They were medical men of some kind. And that alchemical tradition is not to be ignored of 16th, 17th century. Another thing which we need to keep in mind is that most of the time they talked about weather, climate, miasma. It was happening because of certain conditions which were climatic. Bad air, malaria. The area was mal, therefore. Sometimes, even Ayurvedic practitioners, still recent, they talk about, this is Pachya, this kind of wind, it's blowing, so you will have this kind of disease. So these examples were there below, and people were writing texts explaining what to do, how to do. However, the cause of a disease, somehow, we were unable to fix. So the etiology, why and how of a disease, is where we sometimes faltered, both Ayurvedic as well as Unani practitioners. But we always believed that let us build on immunity. Even today, people talk about immunity all the time, in the wake of the recent epidemic. So the body was taken as a kshetra. This kshetra has to be fortified. Diseases are there all around, forget it. If your body is strong enough, you will remain healthy. This was the perception, body as a kshetra. So that is how you feel. Now you see the advertisements, you take Chyawanprash and there is a halo around you. So you become young even at 90, something very impossible. But this had been there. Or Babas are selling tablets of different kinds of spices, mixing spices, and they're making good money. In fact, this was being done in 18th century also. There was something called Tanjore pill in late 18th century, early 19th century, which was being manufactured and, in cases of cholera. People knew about Haja. Haja is a Persian word. Vishuchika, they knew about it. And pills were being prepared locally in different forms with different kinds of spices or minerals together. Doses varied from region to region. There was no standardization. It was not possible at that time. Even today, it's very difficult to achieve, it. Standard medical practices, very difficult. So, we had a strong tradition, but this tradition had certain infirmities which made them appear little weak before the kind of knowledge which was coming from the West, the Western civilization. And that is how they could colonize us. They could colonize large parts of the world through their cutting-edge knowledge and new tools and techniques. Jesuit fathers, when they arrived in India, they didn't arrive only with Bible in their hand. They came with certain pills, quinine, magic, to fight malaria. They also had in their jhola a crude microscope or a crude telescope, which Europe was perfecting or producing right from 17th century onward, 1650 onward. And they could show to the people through those magnifying glasses what had gone wrong. And this glass technology was something so different we were not aware of. Asian civilization excelled in stone culture, marble culture. We had Taj Mahal, but no microscope. Not even telescope. Jai Singh created massive Jantar Mantar for astronomical calculation. He was given a telescope by Jesuit father, but probably he didn't find it useful enough. We had different ways of Indo-Islamic culture had different ways of calculation, different ways of arriving at truth. Jantar Mantar gave you the same result, but it is a huge masonry product. Or they used astrolabes and so forth. Knowledge systems were different. Medical knowledge system, other knowledge systems. We did differ, but there were efforts during 17th, 18th century to know each other. That's very important. So the Danish surgeons, the Portuguese medical men, the English, the French, they all tried to interact. Of course, it remained local, mostly to the catering to the Rajas and the Nawabs, because they could afford to pay them. But interaction was there. In early 19th century, you have a very remarkable example of an Indian prince called Sarfoji Maharaj in Tanjore. Still there is a Saraswati Mahal library there where his instruments are kept. And he had learned the art of cataract removal. He started in Aushadhalaya, a hospital, where he kept the register, some kind of medical statistics was followed. And he invited Vaidyas, he invited Siddha, he invited Ashtavaidyas, Unani Hakims, all kinds of people, Danish surgeons and so forth, and wanted them to synthesize the medical knowledge of that time. Couldn't succeed because each one argued that their system was the most superior, which is, very popular. Even today we see this. Even today we find similar situation. Even in the wake of an epidemic, people dying in thousands and lakhs, you come across, all kinds of claims. Even false claims look true. Somebody said, oh, no, you should have cow dung or lemon juice in your nose. I knew some of my relatives started putting lemon juice to fight. I myself tried to test one of those spicy products called Colonial. Because when times are difficult, when death looms large, reason is affected. And all kinds of good, bad, true, false claims are made. Which you see today, Most of us these days are purveyors of WhatsApp knowledge. We know what is happening. However shameful it might be, but it is.
Sir, it seems there is a internet. Sir, audio is affected, I believe.
Professor Deepak, you have to switch on your video. I'm sorry, audio. Can you just check?
Sir, audio is affected.
अभी क्या है? अब आवाज आई?
अब आ गई।
इसके पहले सारा आधा घंटा गोल हो गया?
नहीं सर, 1 मिनट के आसपास, आधा मिनट, बाकी हम सुन पा रहे थे। थोड़ी देर के लिए ऑडियो में प्रॉब्लम हो रहा था, बाकी ठीक।
But not because of me. I didn't touch anything.
No.
Now, are you okay? Is it fine? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Sorry for that. Technology has its
No, it's
own
okay.
infirmities also.
Yeah, maybe 30
never
seconds.
mind.
30
Not
seconds.
only the body. Okay, thank you. So what I was talking is that people tried to synthesize. Sarfoji Maharaj was trying to synthesize the then existing knowledge available within his territory and coming from outside, and then see that, his people, his subjects enjoy better health. Similarly, in Maharashtra, there was a professor at Elphinstone College, mathematics professor. He talked about, how the local Vaidyas should be taught in English modern Western medical knowledge, imparted. He wanted to integrate both Sanskrit-based knowledge and English-based knowledge. His name was Bal Shastri Jambekar sahab. He used to bring out a journal also, bilingual English Marathi journal, when he talked about, that we have to improve our medical system, our medical knowledge, and this. So efforts were being made. It is during this period of 1820s and 30s that new institutions were tried in different parts, especially when the British government had established its strong hold in Eastern India, in Western India, in Southern India, the three large presidency towns. So you have the establishment of Calcutta Medical College in 1835. You have Grant Medical College coming up in 1845. You have Madras Medical College. Not only medical college, but societies being established. Calcutta Medical and Physical Society. Madras Literary and Scientific Societies, and so forth. These societies were publishing journals, transactions. They came across different kinds of diseases. They took note on it. They published the details with lithograph, print, with photos, etc. So this was a very exciting period, 1830s, 1840s, and so forth. Very exciting. And society was also undergoing a change. I give you a very interesting example of Grant Medical College when it was established in 1845. No student turned up for admission. Today you see medical college admission में मार पड़ती है, लोग करोड़ों रुपया भी देते हैं. But nobody turned up at Grant Medical College. The principal was very worried. He waited for good students or people from respectable families, which means upper caste Brahmins, to turn up. Brahmins won't go because they wouldn't like dissection, touching dead body. So this knowledge was considered something like auspicious, untouchable. For 10 years, nobody turned up. No Brahmin at Grant Medical College. Calcutta Medical College, it worked. The Brahmins, the Vaidyas, and the Kashtas, the upper caste, they immediately hogged it. But in Bombay, it was very difficult. Chikpavan Brahmin are supposed to be known to be very orthodox. So the principal of Grant Medical College in 1851 wrote to the DPI of Bombay Presidency saying why not allow him to open the college admission to lower class people. What he meant was lower caste people. Class and caste in our system gets sometimes confused, like astrology and astronomy. So he said lower class. Now the DPI banned him, told him, don't do this. We have come here to rule, not to cause social upheaval. If you open it to lower caste people, higher kind of knowledge, medical knowledge, they will go back to the society, earn more money, and then demand higher status. वो आज हम देख रहे हो रहा है ना. So, don't do this. Let us wait. Once the Brahmins will realize that there is a lot of money in modern medicine, they will come in hundreds. This is what happened. After 10, 15 years, they realized that there was money. There is a lot of money in medicine. We all know it. Patna is so full of rich people, rich doctors. Lots of them are my friends and relatives. They seldom do medical research, medical practice. This notion gets rooted in mid-19th century. These colleges became mass producers of medical practitioners, not medical knowledge creators. That's a big difference. While in Europe, practitioners were creators also. And people from other disciplines were coming to contribute to it. Louis Pasteur, for example, mid-19th century, was not a medical man. Haffkine, who came to India and introduced vaccines, was a zoologist by training. He was a student of Louis Pasteur. But imagine, had Louis Pasteur not worked on wine and experimented on fermentation, he wouldn't have come across, he wouldn't have founded the germ theory of disease, which we today call germ theory of disease. Louis Pasteur, who made the vaccine, Earlier also vaccines had been made, Jenner's, that vaccine against cowpox. And within few years, it was introduced in India, in Madras Presidency and elsewhere. It was known as vaccination, while the earlier practice was known as variolation. Our own tikadars used to carry live pustules, and they would apply it on the healthy body and induce immunity, limited kind of immunity. And of course, along with propitiation of the goddess Shitala and a food regimentation. It was there, the practice was there, variolation was there for centuries. But what Jenner did was to make Gyan into Vigyan, to convert Gyan into Vigyan. Fix, the idea of fixing the microbe. Today also, you are listening these days of RNA and all kinds of vaccines being prepared. Some live, some dead, and so forth. So you have Covaxin, Covishield, the discussion these days now, this knowledge has become very common. But in mid-19th century, it was not known. People hardly knew how to fix the microbe, how to fix it in such a way as to produce the desired result. It was a huge medical achievement, mid-19th century. As huge a medical achievement as Darwin's theory of evolution. And this created a new epistemology, medical epistemology, whereby the etiology of the disease became very important. Why and how of the disease. Kshetra lost its importance. Immunity kshetra was said, okay, fine, let it be. But if we know the disease, we can attack the disease, the germ itself. So a bacteriologist called Robert Koch visits Calcutta, visits Egypt, and there he finds cholera bacillus in water. Comes to Calcutta in a Calcutta tank water, he finds it within 3 months of his arrival. He knew a little bit earlier and tested his theory, found it cholera bacillus. It happens because of a particular kind of bacillus and highly infectious. So the concept of contagion comes. There were contagionists, there were anti-contagionists. There were people who believed that no, segregation is important. Anybody infected has to be segregated. And this led to a lot of social turmoil all through late 19th century. In Pune, in Bombay, elsewhere. So, lots of violence people were subjected to, and people resented it also. They also took it. Who wanted to be removed from their family members at the time of death? What was happening in late 19th century, we were unfortunate enough, sir, to witness in our own time few months ago. Very unfortunate. People died in large numbers. We couldn't do anything. Our health system was unable to bear the burden, and our greed at the same time. We can learn from our past experience. What was happening in late 19th century? Right from 1861 onward, we had British government takes full control of India. East India Company is abolished in 1858. Full control. Within 2 years, you have both famine and cholera. What did the British government do? Establish a Cholera Commission. 1861, 62. First commission. One of the very interesting aspects of this colonization and the colonial masters was that they wanted to postpone or avoid a decision or focused activity by appointing commission. आज भी हम वही करते हैं, numerous commissions. पता नहीं, मैं आपको रील आउट कर दे सकता हूँ, 50 कमीशन बन गए होंगे. ये कमीशनिंग बिजनेस बड़ा मजेदार है. It doesn't deal only with commission in terms of dalali. वो तो खैर है ही, बाकी इकोनॉमी में आप देखते हैं कि कमीशन चलता है. ये कमीशन स्टेट है हमारा सोसाइटी कमीशन सोसाइटी. For everything there will be a commission. Even for knowledge, you'd be so surprised. I was surprised when it was formed. There was a knowledge commission. दुनिया में कहीं हमने नहीं सुना कभी, इतना जगह गए knowledge commission होगा. देश जो कि कभी कहाँ कहते हैं विश्व गुरु था, सोनी चिड़िया थी, यहाँ भी नॉलेज कमीशन है. वो स्पेसिफाई करती है कैसे नॉलेज बढ़ाया जाएगा, वो बताएंगे. 5-6 people. The commission business starts with the British government, 1861, Cholera Commission. उसके बाद तो कमीशन की झड़ी लग गई. फेमिन कमीशन, एजुकेशन कमीशन, 1881, फिर all kinds of commission you think of. Plague commission. Every 5 years there will be a commission. I had the misfortune of going through those commissions. Agriculture Commission. Many of those commission reports I have seen, several dozen, running into hundreds of volumes. They are preserved in National Archive elsewhere. Then you realize what a great difference it was at the policy level and in reality. On ground level, huge difference. I'm reminded of one Surgeon General 1920. His name was J.D. McGow. He was Surgeon General in 1920s and 30s. Surgeon General is almost a place like ICMR chief today, similar. He said, oh no, we can't do much. Indians, they breed like rabbits and die like flies. When I read this, I squirmed. I breed like rabbit, my forefathers, and die like flies. Why the colonized were considered as less than humans? This was in the logic of history, because we were subdued. We were less than humans. Even now it is happening. With the less than human who died, वो सबको तो मोक्ष मिल गया ना. अभी कुछ महीने पहले I lost some of my own relatives, much younger to me. When I survive, people say, oh, आपकी immunity very strong. I feel ashamed of myself. I don't hold anyone responsible, no. My own self. I'm not ashamed for others. No. वो तो कहेंगे अच्छा हुआ मुक्ति हो गई चले गए. अरे भाई और 2-4 करोड़ को भी मार लो तो और population problem solve हो जाएगा ना. Are we waiting for that kind of epidemic to take toll? 19th century, if colonial government says that Indians, oh, they breed like rabbits and die like flies, my blood boils. But when my own people say, मोक्ष हो गए जो चला गया मुक्ति हो गई, then I feel extremely sad. I hang my head in shame. That's the relevance of why public health should be studied. That's the relevance of why history of medicine should be studied. That's the relevance of why bodies should be studied, our own body, and understood. Late 19th century was probably the worst phase in terms of public health. Still, people talked about. There was a person called Hafkin who introduced vaccines against cholera and against plague. Today you have in Lower Parel, Bombay, Hafkin Institute named after him. But he had great difficulty practicing his craft during 1890s. I've looked into Hafkin papers in Hebrew University Archive in Jerusalem, and I've written papers on him. It was so difficult. He was finally thrown out by Lord Curzon. And he had to reestablish his reputation, which is another story. But there were few bright sparks also, whom we have forgotten, whom we don't acknowledge as Indians. Ronald Ross was born in India. He lived here. He worked in Calcutta and Hyderabad, and you all know he was the person who discovered the parasite which causes malaria. You know, it was so difficult to find numerous insects, thousands of insects, out of which mosquito, one species, out of hundreds of different types of mosquitoes, one only Anopheles, that too female Anopheles, was found to be the carrier of that parasite. So he worked on the life cycle. He could get it. It was absolutely, I would consider it the divine revelation he had. He had a dibbe chakshu, that he could see it. And till today, we haven't been able to make a vaccine against malaria, but we know why malaria is caused. And we have several other ways to deal with it. Sanitation. Sanitation, he put emphasis on. And that becomes, at the end of the 19th century, a watchword, very important word. Sanitize the cities. Sanitize. Today, we all talk about wash your hand, put the mask, this, that. All this is sanitary measures, preventive measures. Prevention, not cure, came up. Cure came in terms of quinine. But prevention, Ronald Ross says, was more important. And Ross was pro-Indian. He was even Hafkin. He said that the British government wants to hide its own incompetence and blames the Indians in terms of religion, etc., etc. All the time, people kept blaming that Indians are imbecile, they are docile, they are useless, they are unhygienic, this and that. Which, of course, you will find in this book, Mother India, by this American lady who visited India, Miss Mayo.
Catherine Mayo?
Catherine Mayo, yes. Catherine Mayo. She shoots us all around and the culture. So, only to blame culture or people is not enough. The same culture also emphasizes personal hygiene. You'll find, that Indians would bathe twice, keep their inside house very clean, but, throw the garbage out of their window or the street next door. But inside it's very clean. Unlike the Europeans who took bath once in a week or once in a month, we were taking bath twice. Of course, our ponds and rivers were not that pristine or pure, as Professor Ashok Ghosh will know more, how the water contamination has affected health problems, public health in India. But anyway, that's another story. So by blaming culture or religion is not enough. Probably is wrong diagnosis. The same poor people who were being thrown out or were dying like flies, had they been given help, proper help and guidance, religion wouldn't have come to their way. I remember reading Hafkin's paper where Hafkin says that people used to come to him, give me the vaccine. They were not against vaccine. Today, it's very easy to say certain class of people, caste of people don't want to take vaccine. They are avoiding it. But you have to reach out to them. And Hafkin says that British government is not interested. They just want to keep, the damage limited. That's all. They somehow to manage their cantonment more, see that their British soldiers, they survive better than the people. And he gives several examples how poor, unfed and half-dead Indians came to him pleading for vaccine. And those vaccines were not available. Those days also, vaccine shortage was there because, hardly there were few laboratories, Mukteshwar, Kasauli, Kunur, 4 or 5, that's all. Today, India is supposed to be a drug capital. Hyderabad, where I live, I smell the fume every day. In my area, there are so many GVK and this and that, all the laboratories are there. We are making huge money. We are exporting vaccines. We are donating vaccines when our own people were dying. See the difference. This is 21st century. I'm talking of late 19th century. Have we moved ahead or gone down? I don't know. You have to learn from history. Anyway, I will not take more time. I have already taken almost 45 minutes. Within 5 minutes, I would like to sum up. This influenza pandemic we had was 1980. 2 years it was there. And it killed more than 10 million people. All around the world, 2 crore people were killed, out of which half were killed in India itself. Why India has to suffer more? Why? Even compared to Africa. Even compared to sub-Saharan Africa. Why? Despite we have the technical know-how, we have the people. We have the manufacturing, we have the medical profession has, numerous medical, trained people. You have millions in this country. These questions remain valid in terms of public health. But here also when we use the term public health, we should also try to ask one question. How public is public health? Kitna public hai public health? Or it is very elitist, very special to certain places, very specified. Apollo aims and so forth. How public is public health? We should ask this. I would like now to, with this question, I would like to end. I could have gone on many things. Bhor committee came in 1945, etc. on health, everything, all the time people talked about. But we shouldn't have expected more from the British government. When the benign British rule ended in 1947, the average age of an Indian was hardly 28 years. Today, if I'm alive at 70, I give credit to my generation, my forefathers and post-independent India that has seen to it that I'm alive. I wish my generation could have done more. I wish we had been better prepared to deal with epidemics. The fault lines, the way it came out, was definitely sad. Still, there were the very fact that longevity had grown shows, infant mortality has gone down shows that some development has taken place. Let us remain positive, rejoice in it, remain positive, but we have miles to go. I don't know. We have miles, quantum miles to go. And it will need not only state effort,
thank you so much, sir.
Societal effort. And this is where I end, societal effort, because health is all about society. Thanks a lot for your care and patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking out time and for such an informative discussion. Lot of things. I'm not the authority. I really enjoyed it from the time I have been your student in JNU. Many things, starting from how you talked about colonialism as a force of history to experiential knowledge, experimental knowledge. We have discussions and they'll talk about it. One of the things that I really enjoyed, and I use it when I teach this course on science, technology, and society to BTech students, final year BTech students here, is the role of organizations, institutions, and how they have shaped up, how science and technology has been in our country. Two of the discussions today are Salini Ocha and Manish Bhardwaj. I'll briefly introduce both of them, and both of them can come in one by one and share their insights. So as I said, Salini ji is a clinical associate professor at the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences, University of Nottingham. She has also been associated with Clinical Academic Training Program as Deputy Director and administered events like Children Lead, Clinical Research Network. She has authored and published many papers. In addition, she's also working as the chief and co-investigator in projects like REACH and Feed1, which is about nutrition and cancer research in newborn. And so it's our pleasure to have her here. And Manish Bhardwaj, he's a CEO and co-founder of Innovators in Health, which works these days primarily in Samastipur. 2 weeks back when I was there, I visited them and I was very overwhelmed. This is when I decided that we must have Manish ji as part of a discussion. Prior to this, he was working with ventures on electrical engineering. He's a MIT graduate. He's also a fellow at the Dalai Lama Center for Ethics at MIT. He's presently teaching in Princeton. We welcome both of you, and we'll want you to share your insights. Maybe you can take 6-7 minutes each. First, we'll go with Salini ji and then Manish. Thank you.
Dr. Shalini, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Rookie error.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yes. So I was just saying thank you to everyone for this opportunity, and mainly for the opportunity to listen to such a distinguished speaker. I am a doctor by profession. I am a pediatrician and doctor. But this part of medicine's history was very new to me. When you sent me the invitation, such is the wonderful knowledge available to us, that I had a few weeks to look up Professor Kumar's work and read a few of his articles. So it was really good to hear from him today, everything. And I have made so many notes, I mean, from what you have said, which resonate with my own experience as a doctor and what I have seen working both briefly in India as a doctor and then for a longer period here in the UK, but regularly going back home, as it still is and always will be for me, to meet with colleagues and people and see how medicine has evolved in India, even after I left. A few points that really meant a lot to really spoke to me from what you said, Professor Kumar. You began with the definition of health and speaking about how health is not just the absence of disease. And I remember one of the very first lectures we had as a medical student in Banaras Hindu University. We were given the definition of health as not just the absence of disease, but a state of physical, mental, and social well-being. And I think that is the one lesson that practitioners of medicine remember. A lot of what you have said will come into our practice very naturally. The main summary of the main summary that I took from the first part of your speech was when you were talking about the wisdom that Indian medicine has or had historically, and how that was overtaken by what, for argument's sake, we will call Western or European medicine. Has to me it has become, and I think I got some of that from your talk also, has been our approach to canonizing knowledge. And I take that word from you, from canonizing knowledge and our inability to challenge pre-existing knowledge. And that perhaps is what has stopped us from developing. It's that lack of application of scientific approach, modern scientific approach to medicine, and are saying, well, that might be what you observed so many years ago, but what I am observing is different. And therefore we need to test, we need to experiment, we need to find which of these two things is right. And that's perhaps where we need to move on with progress. And I think that inhibition of the Indian culture and medical knowledge has at least I believe, and has been a direct consequence of colonialism. It is almost a deep-seated cultural acceptance of inferiority which has held us back into thinking that none of this scientific knowledge that is being talked about is exclusive to Western medicine. Science is universal. Science, like science and mathematics, are everyone's language. That whether it is in English, Hindi, Sanskrit, or Latin, it speaks the same language. And our inability to accept that we are just as capable of applying those scientific methods to our practice as Louis Pasteur or Robert Koch might have been is I think where the difference happened. But coming more to the more recent experiences, particularly of what happened with the pandemic, it has been such a painful experience for all of us all around the world. And the survivor's guilt that you mentioned, Professor Kumar, I think resonates with everyone. And it resonates even more with doctors like me who spent that period of Indian pandemic in the safety of living in a European nation and living with the guilt of this, how much of a difference, whether that would have happened or not, how much at this point in time my country needs me. And here I am somewhere else when I was needed the most. And there are so many things, but what really would have, what really should come out of this, even the worst thing, we can get something positive out of it, it has been a call for the Indian medical system, for every doctor and nurse in India or one of Indian origin, to go back to basic scientific methods, to go back to numbers. There is so much power in data. There is so much power in data, and to harness that power, to go back and learn the lessons, raise our hands and say, this is where we went wrong. And the next time it happens, because sad as it is, the pandemic will come again. And this time it will not be 100 years. This time it will be sooner. We will be prepared the next time, and we will not make the mistakes that we've made this time. And the next time, we will not lose so many lives. So we don't have to do what the fatalism of Indian culture has taught us to do, that you said is moksh mil gaya unko to, as if the person who's died, we've all done them a favor by letting them die. We haven't. And that's the fact. There is no other way to put it. We haven't. They have died because we did not help them, or we could not help them. If we are being nice about ourselves, we could not help them, but perhaps we did not help them. And that's where this has to go. But for me, reading your work and learning this, the biggest thing has been that it has made me think about the very cliched adage of, if we don't know history, we are bound to repeat it. And learning how colonialism has impacted our thinking and what that means to me as an individual and to my profession as a doctor. I think I have moved on a lot from learning from where I was a few weeks ago, from reading your work. I hope I have understood some of it. And today definitely was very, very enlightening. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll request Manish ji to come in. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me start out. So thank you, Dr. Ojha. Thank you, Professors Ghosh and Kumar. My work is chiefly in social justice, particularly in making sure that the rural poor have access to healthcare, and not second-class or third-rate healthcare, but the healthcare that I would expect my family to get. It's of course an ideal, and so we don't achieve it perfectly, but that is our goal. And more recently, I'm teaching students how to undertake the work of justice. So generally, to me, all discussions I view through that lens. And many of my students are instrumentalists. They are scientists or engineers, or training to be physicians. And what I try and teach students, and what this sort of session has taught us, is the importance of history and sociology, and to be alert to sort of the extractive templates and the tropes that, Professor Kumar and Professor Ghosh have sort of pointed us to. So, the points I want to make, so principally to me, science and medicine, the victories of science and medicine are, to me, from my vantage point, completely hollow if they are limited to those with advantages, right? And so unless we combine it with a very clear morality, these are not sort of, they're not a boon to us. They just increase inequality. They don't close it. So, we have to start first with blame. And both professors, Ghosh and Kumar, sort of pointed out how we blamed groups. And we blame to sort of overcome our own morality, right? It's very hard to have an encounter with the poor or someone who's going to die for the lack of few hundred rupees, which, by the way, happens in India today. And so we sort of start out by blaming the poor, which we always have. We start out by blaming women, which we always have. I see that firsthand. Early in the pandemic, we started by blaming Muslims, which we have to acknowledge have, right? So the first way to kind of deny access to, to science or medicine is to blame the marginalized. So that's something we should be alert to. Speaking of the pandemic response, it's important to recognize that I think calamities are certainly unavoidable, but societal calamities are to some extent a result of policy and politics, right? So our response could have been, I think we could have responded in ways, we could have had policies which would not have completely eliminated sort of the impact, but would have lessened the destruction. I also think that the way we sort of understand science is affected by who we include in science. And till we sort of include the marginalized in science, it will be only a particular kind of science. It will only be a particular kind of medicine, right? And this extends to every discipline. So I think we have to make sure that, for instance, in our pursuit of excellence, that women are adequately represented, that, across castes, we are adequately represented, across religions, we are adequately represented. And again, the history tells us, history almost allows us to predict with great precision how calamity will unfold. I think a wonderful statement made by Professor Kumar was, how public is public health? So from someone who works for social justice, public health is very happy if it gets to 95%, right? But sort of our work is, who are the 5% that it did not get to? Why do we always run out of money when it comes to the poor? And when you look at the 5% who get excluded, again, you see that the excluded are the poor, the excluded are the minorities, the excluded are women. So it's a really profound question. How public is public health? Who is it serving? But from my experience, I guess, to end on I don't want to end on a dispiriting note. Change is also possible. Inequity is not a result of. It's not a given. It's policies, right? It's what we decide to do. So, for instance, in my work in rural Bihar, when we argued that patients of tuberculosis should also get food, I was dismissed as a wild-eyed idealist. But 7 years later, it became policy. When we said that female healthcare workers, their salary should be tripled, people laughed. but 6 years later they were quadrupled. And so again and again, you sort of see that we make decisions. These are decisions of policy, and again, I think history is important and sociology is important. All the tropes that Professor Kumar and Professor Ghosh pointed to, we need to be alert to those tropes. Those tropes are very much active today. They very much work the same way. The colonial mentality is well and alive, at least in the way our institutions work. So being alert to these tropes, being alert to how injustice works and how justice can work is really crucial to making sure that science and medicine serves each of us, not 90, not 98%, but really each of us. So thank you again for the invitation and for reminding us of the importance of what has been, so we can go to a better place in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was our intent. Along with Professor Deepak Kumar talking, we wanted to have, as we have, like Professor Ghosh, who is an academic, administrator, a clinical practitioner, like Salini Hoja, and what we call Manish Bhardwaj as a social entrepreneur. Now, before we ask Professor Deepak Kumar to come in, we will also request other people, like if Professor Ghosh has something to say, or Professor Sachidanand Sinha has something to say, and I see Professor Tulsi Patel is here. So if I think Professor Sachidanand Sinha wants to say something. Sir, it's to you. Sachi, sir.
Thank you, Professor Deepak. It was wonderful listening to you after a very, very long time. And I have been reading your work, and these things are all, that will go on, because as long as you write, I will keep reading if I survive. If not this pandemic, maybe some other pandemic. The problem is, to my mind, I'm little, because somewhere somewhere not in so much in a presentation, but the kind of a feel that it leaves around is the fact that we got defeated in our competition with the Western medicine, and because they had control, or maybe they were whatever, the power, the force of history. But I think our societal framework was ready. It was readily available to be defeated, because those who really did medicine or had the knowledge of medicine would go this far and not further. You only said that they would not do anatomy, है ना? वो अस्पृश्यता के दौर में चला जाएगा। अभी भी हमको मालूम है कि हमारे बिहार में, मैं भी बिहार का हूं और आप भी हैं, जो मुर्दा घर है वो अस्पताल से शहर के बाहर होता है ना? और उसी के बगल में वो एक हॉस्टल होता है, इसको कहते हैं हरिजन हॉस्टल। ये दोनों को एग्जिस्ट करते हैं, आप देखेंगे, बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है। मैं ज्योग्राफी का आदमी हूं, थोड़ा लोकेशनल एनालिसिस करता हूं। अब मुद्दा ये है, माफ कीजिएगा मैं हिंदी में आ गया क्योंकि आपको भी हिंदी समझ में आती है। मुद्दा ये है कि, और ये सवाल आपसे नहीं है, मेरा सवाल ये सबों से है, सवाल भी नहीं है, एक कोशिश है कि इस बात को समझ सके कि दो चीजें बहुत प्रामाणिक तौर से हमारे सामने आती हैं। वो ये कि हमने जो भी साइंस ऑफ मेडिसिन ऑब्जर्वेशन के आधार पर, या उसको एक्सपेरिएंशियल कह ले, एक्सपेरिमेंटल कह ले, हमने उसका कहीं रिकॉर्ड इक्के दुक्के कुछ लोगों ने छोड़ा हो तो मैं नहीं जानता, मैं हिस्ट्री का विद्यार्थी नहीं हूं, लेकिन हमने कहीं रिकॉर्ड छोड़ने की कोशिश नहीं की या रिकॉर्ड बनाने की कोशिश नहीं की। क्योंकि रिकॉर्ड जो है, डेटा जो है, वो हमेशा करता है। मैं डेटा का आदमी हूं, मैं जानता हूं बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें हैं जो लोग कहते हैं, मैं उसको चैलेंज कर सकता हूं डेटा के आधार पर। तो ये डेटा जो है उसने आपने कभी छोड़ा नहीं, क्योंकि वो जो परंपरा रही है हमारे यहाँ समाज में कि भाई जो जिसको कहते हैं क्या, वैद्य का बेटा ही वैद्य होगा। मेरी शादी भी एक वैद्य के परिवार में हुई है, पहाड़ी वैद्य के परिवार में, और चूंकि उनके किसी बेटे ने नहीं सीखा इसलिए वो वैद्य की नॉलेज उनके साथ सब कुछ स्वाहा हो गई। The problem is, where is the problem then? Why is it that our society, which, I mean, that is something, which is, I mean, you are not I mean, this question is certainly not to you, but you know it, what I'm really trying to ask, that there has been this system of appropriating the knowledge and keeping the knowledge away from the public domain. And at whatever time that it may have happened in Europe, it did not at the simultaneously or maybe a few years later happened in India. It kept on being guarded exactly the way, like, I still go to some homeopath practitioners and I don't get to know as to what is the medicine that they are writing. I just take it out of my faith in them. So the question is, what is the difficulty? Why? So the difficulty is very simple. We would like to keep that particular knowledge guarded so that we remain or we maintain. वो मोक्ष की जो आप बात कर रहे थे, जब हमारे पास कुछ नहीं होता ना तब मोक्ष की बात करते हैं, जब हमारे पास कोई सोल्यूशन नहीं होता तब मोक्ष की बात करते हैं कि चलो वो तो चला गया परलोक, भाई आत्मा परमात्मा दोनों लीन हो गए, भाई उसको ऊपर ज्यादा जरूरत थी, है ना। वो एक दिल बहलाने का ख्याल अच्छा है, लेकिन जो लॉस जिस परिवार को हुआ है तो वो तो हुआ है और उसका एक क्युमुलेटिव इफेक्ट है। और ये हमने कभी नहीं सोचा कि ये जो हमारे दरवाजे दस्तक दे सकता है। तो ये तो एक मुद्दा है जहन में कि हमने कभी, जिस तरह से एक हसिया जो हमारे बिहार में कहते हैं जिससे घास काटा जाता है, वो किसी आदमी ने नहीं, उसके नाम, उसका इन्वेंशन किसने किया ये तो आपको पता ही नहीं, हमको भी नहीं पता, है ना। वो इन्वेंशन उन लोगों ने किया जिन्होंने काम किया वहां पे, जिन्होंने घास काटे, उन्होंने काटा है, उनके इन्वेंशन। हमारा पूरा सिस्टम जो है वो इस तरह का है, और मैं भारद्वाज की बात से बिल्कुल सहमत हूं कि जब तक हम इस एप्रोप्रिएशन के प्रोसेस को नहीं सोचेंगे, जस्टिस के बात तो भूल जाएं, जस्टिस के आड़ में हम एक नया एप्रोप्रिएशन का मेथडोलॉजी डेवलप करें।
यस सर, थैंक यू,
है ना। जब हम कहते हैं ना कि तमाम सारे ग्लोबलाइजेशन से सबका बड़ा फायदा होने वाला है, तो हमको ही मालूम है दीपक भाई और सच्चिदानंद सिन्हा का फायदा होगा, लेकिन बाकी तमाम सारे लोगों का फायदा नहीं होने वाला। मुझे इतना पक्का मालूम है। इस पैंडेमिक में जितना आराम से मैं रह गया, डर यही था कि दस्तक देने वाला कहीं इन्फेक्टेड आदमी तो नहीं है, उतना ही से कोहराम मच जाता था घर में। क्या होगा उन लोगों का जो ठेले पे केले बेचते थे, उनका क्या हुआ? आई मीन, जिसका जिक्र शालिनी जी ने किया और मेरे ख्याल से मनीष जी ने भी किया, वो बिल्कुल। तो मेरे ख्याल से एक नए सोच की जरूरत है। वो जो स्थापित सोच है, जो कैनोनाइज्ड नॉलेज है, उसको क्वेश्चन करने की जरूरत है। आई विश कि उस ग्रांट कॉलेज में वो पहला जो दरख्वास्त था उस प्रिंसिपल का, वो अप्रूव हो जाता, कम से कम कुछ तो दीवारें गिरती। शुक्रिया जनाब, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया। बहुत
थैंक यू सर,
आज के दिन
thank you. Very pertinent questions about social structure. I would also request Professor Ghosh if he wants to come in, or Dr. Papia if she wants to come in, and then we will take some questions. There was a question in the chat box by Sekhar Dwivedi ji, but can I request Dr. Papia to just come in and talk a little bit, less than 3 minutes or so? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Dr. Aditya, for allowing me to speak. So This was such an interesting topic that always these days we talk about public health, whether people understand it or not. Everybody knows this terminology, this public health. But if we kind of look into the historical context, which I think was very well crafted by Professor Deepak Kumar, and even in today's time, if we see in a country, in a state like Bihar, which is termed as Bimaru state, EAG state, all the negative connotations that you have commissioned by those committees that were set up, Bihar has a tag to it. And if you try to kind of locate the number of medical shops in Bihar, and all of us, those who have lived here or has visited, will see there are innumerable of these medical shops across. Even in Bilens, it might be difficult to find a grocery shop, but you can find a medical shop. And what is most interesting is that even till date, we do have the colonial imprints, because most of these medical shops have the caption written below them, Angreji Dawakhana. So we kind of acknowledge it is not our own, it is something that we have borrowed from. And now coming to the historical perspective, I think the background that Professor Ashok Ghosh gave us, that always we have this blame game. First, we blamed God, then we blamed nature, then we started blaming the government. So there is something or someone that we always blamed, but we never wanted to take the onus on ourselves. And especially when it comes to health, as Professor Deepak Kumar so well elaborated, the concept of Chetra and how to kind of build the immunity, how to protect the fort, this concept of vaccine, how it was, we had our own traditional concepts, but how also the Westerners, just for their benefit, they wanted to kind of vaccinate the people so that their work could be carried out. And also what I enjoyed the most, again coming from a geographical perspective, is Deepak sir, the way you brought out the relation between history and geography, talking about tropical medicine, tropical health, that how climate has an influence on our health seeking behavior, and also, kind of combating or dealing with the health problem or the diseases that we have had. And most importantly, what was very pertinent, and even in today's world, is the difference between medical practitioners and medical knowledge creators, and how this knowledge is kind of stratified in the hands of few, how there is lack of knowledge dissemination, how it is kind of fortified. You think that it is your own, you just cannot let it go. It is such a precious thing that if you let it go and people benefit from it, then as if the whole purpose of knowledge creation is lost. You cannot let it go to the public. And when we come to the concept of public health, sir, as you rightly said, that how public is the public health? The question is, who is the public? About whom are we talking about? May I just request Sominde to mute yourself because the voice is echoing. Thank you. So who is the public? Sir, in one of your earlier lectures during the pandemic, you had mentioned that, when we have these policies of social isolation, home quarantine, and when we have these people where just in 2 rooms, 8 people are living, how do you talk about isolation, home quarantine? So do we actually know the public, or even the concept of public is recreated to suit the focus of some others? So that is what I really wanted to talk from your your lecture, sir. And I think Professor Shalini has a very well mentioned, and I really like the terminology that you use, the survivor's guilt. You know that how guilt-ridden we become, and how we forget the actual definition of health. Even when we start our classes on public health, I tell my students we need to know the WHO's definition of health by heart. But do we actually practice it? Why are we so much focused on the curative aspect of health? And that brings us to what Dr. Manish Bhardwaj has talked about, the unequal access to the health resources. And I also appreciate Dr. Bhardwaj for bringing in the concept of gender inequality, and how, you know, some of the things should go hand in hand. Like from your experience in Samastipur, you talked about that how TB patients should be given also food, because that is kind of a necessity for the TB patients to survive, and also the medicines to work on them. Similarly, in the time of pandemic, when we had seen there was so much of hue and cry about people not taking the vaccines, we like in our permanent campus, near our permanent campus in Beta, we have quite a few villages, and they were not ready to take the vaccine. And we asked them, क्यों नहीं लेते हैं? And they said, like, you know, it is a ploy, because we were healthy, but after taking the vaccine, we get fever, we fall sick. So what was necessary is just with the vaccine, give a strip of paracetamol, which is a very chronic, which is a very generic medicine, and it is very low cost medicine. So some of the things, these are the things that we miss out, and it's kind of, we want to focus on the broader goal, but we forget the smaller nuances. And that was from my point of view, and I really enjoyed the points that was raised by all the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Ghosh, do you want to come in after hearing everything, and then we'll ask Professor Deepak Kumar?
Yeah, it was a wonderful discussion through all the participants. Just to conclude, I would like to say that COVID-19 was not the first pandemic and not the last. It is, you know, always evolving process. As we evolve, the microbes also evolve, diseases also evolve, and nature always throws challenge. So we cannot be complacent. We have to strengthen the health system as far as possible, not firefighting thing. When pandemic comes, then knee-jerk action is there, and then we become, you know, relaxed. That okay, that's gone. So that is the message from me, that it's a continuous process, and we have to strengthen our health system, and whatever, whether it is Ayurvedic system or what you call allopathic system or other systems, they all have good points and bad points, and they have to coordinate to give the solution to the new emerging problem. And I hope that now government is in a position after this pandemic, because this pandemic came after a long time. So we were unprepared. In future, we'll be more prepared and more ready to face the problems as humanity. Thank you very much to all of you for listening and inviting me. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Professor Deepak Kumar, do you want to add, you know, as part of some of the things that you might have heard?
Thank you very much, Dr. Roja, Dr. Bhardwaj. Very grateful for your kind words, and you understood whatever I wanted to say. I agree that, you know, the idea is to minimize the impact. It will be there. Diseases are bound to be there all the time. Yes, they will. They were there earlier. They will remain later also. The point is, how do we manage? Health is not only science; it's also a management issue. Medicine is both science and art. Medicine has enormous canvas. And these days, when we have become truly interdisciplinary, then, you know, it's the age of biology. I have found many of my very good friends who worked on, I had a very good friend in MIT who who was an electrical engineer from IIT Delhi. I asked him, "Yeah, what are you doing as a biologist there?" He said, "Oh, you don't know electricity. This is powerhouse. There is a lot of electricity going on." So he became a neurobiologist and one of the very fine mind. Yes. So these days, thanks to interdisciplinary understanding, most of our disciplines have come together, and we need to collaborate. We need to pool our resources together. So you don't need only virology, you need all kinds of people to pool their resources, come closer. It's an age of biology. So cell specialists, you have the biotechnologists, you have pure biophysicists, you have engineers, all joining hands for cutting edge medical knowledge. This is one part. Second would be how to take this knowledge to the people, to as many, greatest good of the greatest number, 19th century, you see, you had this philosophy of Bentham, greatest good of the utilitarianism, greatest good of the greatest number. We keep on trying. I don't blame anybody. I don't blame the government. I don't blame the system. There is no point. System has evolved. It is not that we have really gone down. We have evolved. We are learning fast. And thanks to new technologies, it's very easy to now communicate also. So let us take advantage of and minimize the damage which Dr. Bharadwaj was talking about. And I'm sure, yes, with the guidance from our very, very worthy professionals, I would like to know a little more from Professor Ghosh later, maybe. Would like to read him on water. Water arsenic, yes, Bangladesh is suffering, Bengal is suffering, Bihar is suffering, everywhere. So, and it is so complex. It's not a chemical problem only. Several disciplines need to contribute to it. And I'm sure that we will continue to explore, and the society. I would like to end on an optimistic note. The worst is probably over. Now we need to build up again. And in future, I'm sure the damage will be much less than what we suffered recently. Much, much less. We would be better prepared. The whole world would be better prepared. There are enormous challenges, but we have enormous opportunities also. New tools, new techniques, so many things are coming up. We can use them. We can find out how to deal with it. Thank you very much. For a few questions, I think I have taken a lot of your time.
No, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, I think Tulsi Patel ma'am is here. I saw her camera on. So I'll request her if she wants to come in. And there are 2-3 questions. If Tulsi ma'am is not around, may I ask Dwivedi ji? Ma'am, are you around? Tulsi ma'am? Okay, so we'll come to her. There is a question by Shekhar Dwivedi. Dwivedi ji. Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, Professor Deepak Kumar, Professor Shalini, and Professor Manish. All the three of them had made such an interesting combination. Thank you very much for informing so much about medicine and public health. I just wanted to ask one simple question. Where does herbal medicine, homemade kadhas, and naturopathy come in the systems of medicine? Because this has been something which has been going on for such a long time, centuries and centuries. So much happens and we call them grandmother's remedies or herbal medicine or naturopathy. Where does India stand in this context historically? And even during the pandemic, there was such a value assigned to these practices. And why do we constantly think of the canonized knowledge and not this? So part of your discussion on canonization settles this, but not even to be recognized as something that has existed and has been effective. how do we look at this disparity in terms of the kind of various inequalities that Professor Shalini, you and Professor Manish mentioned? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. Let us take a couple of more questions, and then together, Professor Deepak Kumar will, can I ask Dwivedi ji to unmute himself and ask his question, and then Anand, and then Pooja?
Am I audible, sir?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Yes. Go ahead.
Am I audible?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you for acknowledging my question. I have two questions. The first would be, you were talking about how this Charak Samhita was written during the 2nd century BC, and I had just read something about the Aeneid by Virgil, and I was confused why the Charak Samhita came to the knowledge of the whole global scientist came to the global scientist, and why Aeneid, which was just a propaganda, it was made so much famous just quite before the Charak Samhita, even though the Charak Samhita has a lot more knowledge than you can even think of, while the Aeneid is just a literary fiction.
Thanks. Thank you. So, Anand, do you want to ask your question? Anand Balmiki, my friend. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, Charan Sparsh, thank you Aditya for this opportunity. Charan Sparsh, Deepak sir, I am Aditya's batch, Zakir Hussain Center, and I am your student. I can't use past tense. I am your student of history of science and history of education. And you were so energetic, and you are continually being so energetic, because I met you in 2017 in JNU, and you are so energetic, enthusiastic, and so powerful with your speech and specialization, expertise in the area. My question is, Deepak sir, thanks for all the discussants, speakers, as well as those who have posed the questions. My question is very, very simple, sir. I'm a very simple person. My question would be like conventional wisdom versus scientific method in medical sciences. What do you approve? And what are your canons, or what are your recommendations about conventional Charak? People are talking about Charaka Samhita, people are talking about Ayurveda, people are talking about so many things. So I just want your take on conventional wisdom of my mighty Bharat and Western scientific method on which medicine is based on. That's it, sir. Hey, thank you, Aditya. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you, my brother-in-law.
Thank you. We'll take one last question. Pooja, Chris, you want to ask your question? Please be very brief. Just the question, please. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for such an enlightening and insightful session. Sir, my question is that we see that even after the proliferation of Western medicine and drugstore to a considerable extent, its usage is somehow limited in rural areas. And the reasons for the same can be many, like lack of health literacy among people, out-of-pocket expense, and even sometimes a lack of felt needs among them. So, sir, in this case, how prudent it is for people to rely on traditional medicine or traditional healers that rural people always do. And this also raises concerns for the low outreach of Ayush in India. So, sir, we would like to have your comment on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pooja. Deepak sir.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I won't take much of your time.
Sir, Deepak sir, I'm faculty, Anand Valmiki is faculty of sociology of education.
Anand, later.
Yeah.
Later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good to see you. I'm so glad that it got a overwhelming response. I'm happy. Do try to read one of my edited book called Medical Encounter in British India. And my next project is writing on medical knowledge, of which I know so little. I'm little diffident, but still I will try to answer some of the questions in my forthcoming publications. Now, one very beautiful term which we have used is conventional wisdom and scientific. And Professor Patel also talked about that why, folk medicine, are not being taken care of. Well, but I would rather argue what is wrong? Vaccine and Kada can coexist. In our country, the jet and Belgadi coexist. They go together. Chalta hai. Why can't they coexist? Long ago, China experimented with barefoot doctors. And I have visited China a couple of times. They were very strong, their own indigenous medical system. And now the point is that health is such an issue which needs to be tackled from multiple perspectives. Let us not throw the baby with the bath water. There might be certain infirmities in Ayurveda, Unani, etc., etc. I can take care of those criticisms, but don't throw the baby with the bath water. Certain things we need to learn, and moreover, some of these things are easily available or may help the poorest of the poor. So we cannot make a very, high quality medical care available to everyone. But at least some kind of tested and acceptable medicine and medical system to large number of people. This was being attempted in late 19th, 18th, early 20th century by people like P.S. Varyar, Kotakal, Aryavedesha, Hakim Ajmal Khan in Delhi, Tibia College. And he was a very modern person. It is not, though he was a very prominent Hakim, but he had his mind open. Then he established Jamia, established Tibia College, etc. He was person responsible for establishing CDRI in Lucknow, Central Drug Research Institute. So we should try to learn from those experiments, encourage them. Unfortunately, this is also the day of propaganda, thanks to new technologies. So you have Babas coming up and taking a large share of the advertisement and money and so forth. But this doesn't mean that all of our traditional knowledge system was something to be thrown out. No. They can coexist. Let us examine them again within single quote scientifically, because this has to be the way science is done in MIT. Probably it may not be being done in IIT Patna. Though you both have very common IT terms, but the way it is done differs. However, I would not run down one against the other. No. Let us try to see if certain kind of elevation is possible. So conventional wisdom and scientific method are not aliens. They are not enemies. They can come together. In fact, the very term wisdom says, wisdom, so bahut badi baat. Whether it is conventional or modern, whether it is pre-modern or post-modern, वो तो बाद की बातें हैं. Wisdom तो है. That wisdom should not be thrown, number one. Homeopathy, people differ, but there were people like Mahendralal Sarkar in mid-19th century. He had proper medical training, then he left it and took to homeopathy. And I have seen how homeopathy medicine also works in certain kind of allergies, certain kind of ailments. In certain other kinds, it may not work. Epidemic is a serious situation. Epidemic is a very, very serious situation, so it should be handled with a certain amount of cohesion, which probably WHO or ICMR and many others were talking about. To some extent we failed, but to some extent we succeeded also. most of our medical warriors, they contributed a great deal in containing that. Not only that, the speed with which vaccines were prepared, new kinds of vaccines. This RNA technology is something which we couldn't have imagined a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, the way they have done. Virology has undergone huge transformation. I mean, future historians will record how this pandemic played a role in that huge transformation. People are talking about that some of these scientists may get in future Nobel Prizes, etc. So whatever, it is not there. Moreover, lots of knowledge has now come to ordinary people are talking about. They now know what is virus. Earlier they were not aware of. They want to know the difference between bacteria and virus, parasite and bacteria, and so forth. So that's a development. That's it. We can build upon that. In rural area, you rightly said, my friend, that they have to rely on local. But this is where quackery comes. It is for the government, for the health workers, for the ASHA workers, for the health inspectors, etc., to see that they are trained, they are given something. And rural people will finally, how many of them have the money to go to big hospitals or afford? AIIMS or the government hospitals are so overburdened. AIIMS in Delhi was supposed to be a research center. It has become a referral. Most of places where AIIMS is being set up in most of the capitals, this is the problem. They have all become referral. So we need to, see that we need to encourage some of those medical practitioners who have the flair for new researches. They should be given the opportunity. And things would improve. Of course, the greed part in India is unfortunately it's not on leash. Greed is something which has social sanction. Money is something which has social sanction. People keep asking me, you have published book, how much royalty you have got? Arey bhai, I am not Chetan Bhagat. I am not Chetan Bhagat. Who will give me money? I write for my Swanta Sukhaya, for my pleasure. If you read it, if you find it, find it. So greed is something, unfortunately, money orientation and administrative, this whole, that prasashan is supreme. Nobody is bothered if you can come out with a medical device or something, but if you pass an IS examination, from CM to PM will congratulate you. What is this? Every day you Google and you will see how a poor family man becomes an IS. And Bihar is known for it. I know in my area, my time also, everybody was running after IPS. Oh, lal batti chahiye usko. What do you do? Who took to historical research? Nobody wanted. Science college. Look at this science college. Have they produced scientists? Ask them anybody. They produce home secretary and cabinet secretary. Let them. Naam science college. What do you do? What do you do? Even IITs? What can you do? ऐसे में knowledge की बात करना बड़ा मुश्किल हो गया. Very difficult it has become to talk about knowledge. Because even though we claim ourselves that we want to become Vishwaguru, etc., we haven't become good students. Only good students can become good teachers. Good guru to abhi banenge na. You need good students. You need education. You need knowledge-oriented education. Knowledge society is not Gurgaon, Bangalore, and Cyberabad, where I live now. It is not. Knowledge economy is not really conducive to knowledge society. जो बड़े shops हैं, TCS, Infosys, fine, they give us some money, but they bring us some money, some FDI, but this is not really knowledge. We need cutting edge knowledge in different branches of knowledge, including medical knowledge. Sometime I ask my friends, tell me 5 names of medical people whom you can cite as examples of, say, comparable to Satyen Bose, Meghnath Saha, J.C. Bose, batao. Physics mein you can give me for 10 names. In medicine, it's very difficult to find names. Why? And this is a billion plus population. So I would like to emphasize the significance of knowledge, medical knowledge per se, and then only we would be able to, with the help of an infrastructure, we would be able to ensure greater happiness of the greatest number. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. We can keep on talking, but this is just after Vijayadashmi, and it's a Saturday. We were here for more than 2 hours. Thank you, everyone. May I now request Dr. Papia for a brief, formal vote of thanks, and then we'll say bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. First and foremost, when I propose the formal vote of thanks, I would like to thank ICSSR-IMPRESS for the generous funding, which allowed us to conduct this contemporary development debates over the few weeks. I would like to thank Professor Ashok Ghosh. He's one of those person you can always count on, whether it is our workshop, delivering lecture, or even today's inaugural note. Whenever we have approached sir, he has never said yes. So sir, thank you once again for being with us and enlightening us with your knowledge and experience. Our speaker of the day, Professor Deepak Kumar, we cannot thank you enough, sir, and we express a sincere gratitude. You have always, and you are always, a teacher and a mentor for us, especially for Dr. Aditya. And, thank you for emphasizing the role of learning from past and how important it is, and how you emphasized for us to realize the significance of medical knowledge. Thank you once again, sir, for your such a illustrative lecture with such meaningful examples which make us rethink and reanalyze the situation. I'd also like to thank our discussants, Dr. Shalini Ojha from UK and Dr. Manish Bhardwaj from USA. Thank you for joining us despite the time difference and also sharing your insightful comments. Our special thanks to Professor Sachidanand Sinha and Professor Tulsi Patel for your very thought-provoking comments and questions that made the discussion more lively. And we would also like to thank all our participants for joining us and making this lecture series a success, as you have been doing it over the weeks. We'd also like to extend our thanks to our PhD scholars who have been very supportive and enthusiastic and helpful. And of course, special thanks to our technical team led by Sajal and his batchmate for the smooth streaming of the event on YouTube live on every week. And of course, we'd like to extend our thanks to our staff in the R&D department of IIT Patna. And last but not the least, I'd like to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Aditya, my spouse and faculty colleague at IIT Patna, who is always there with me and without whose support we would not have been able to conduct this so smoothly. Now, before we conclude, we'd just like to ask Dr. Aditya to make announcement for our next lecture series on the 20th. Dr. Aditya.
So we'll be closing now. Thank you, everyone. A lot of thank yous. So the next lecture is going to be on this Wednesday. Catherine from DePaul will be here. I know her from a conference, and we have been trying to get something done. And then we have Arima Mishra from Ajim Premji as a discussant that day, and Chinmay Tumbe from IIM Ahmedabad. I think he's the one who has published a lot in our generation in the recent past. So Chinmay and will be there as discussions, and Professor A.K. Sarma will be as for the inaugural. Thank you all. It's 9:10. I think the screen is visible. I also tried to share, and one of our student also wanted to come in and share. So yeah, Abhinav, thank you very much. Let's call it a day now, and let's please keep in touch and continue the debates further, so that the poorest of the poor can also benefit. Thank you so much, sir. Bye bye.
Thank you so much.